thank you all for coming to our Wildcatalyst seminar. My name is Chelsea DiGiuseppe. I am the marketing manager for UNH Innovation. So this year, our seminar theme is Women in Research and Innovation. And so our aim with the content is to explore the opportunities, the challenges and pitfalls of launching and running research and innovation-based businesses while highlighting exemplary women in the field. So each seminar will be led by entrepreneurial female researchers or women who have founded or led research-based businesses. So before I introduce our speaker, I just wanted to say a big thank you to our generous sponsors this year. We have Hamilton Brooks Smith Reynolds, and they're a Boston-based full-service intellectual property law firm. We have Saunders and Silverstein, a law firm in Amesbury, Mass. That provides services related to trademarks, copyright, internet software, and entertainment law. And we have Pierce Atwood, an award-winning multi-service regional law firm. And there's a table out under the TV with all of their information if you're interested in learning more about any of them. So following today's presentation, we just invite you all to stay and network with us and enjoy some food and some beverages. Just a reminder, if you are not 21 or older, please refrain from the beer. Much appreciated. Our speaker tonight is Karil Reibold. Through her consulting business, Karil provides executive coaching and works with companies to define organizational strategy. And she also co-teaches at the Paul College here at UNH. And the topics that she is teaching on are private equity, venture, capital finance, and the meaning of entrepreneurship. So throughout her 25 years of experience, Karil has worked at venture funds and has held several really interesting leadership roles with venture-backed companies and other startups. So we are really looking forward to hearing from her extensive experience tonight. So welcome.
How many of you have an idea for starting a company or a product? Wow, that's great. Why do you think that people don't start their ideas or pursue their ideas? What would some of the reasons be? Can you think of one?
Safety. Because it's safer not to, right?
Because it's safer not to?
And it's an enormous time commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So having the free time.
Yep.
Not have capital.
Yep. Anything else?
They don't know the next step.
Mm-hmm.
That was mine.
Maybe fear too. So we're going to talk tonight about ideas. We're going to talk about how to take your idea and turn it into reality and what the steps are to do that. But first, what do these entrepreneurs all have in common? Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, Oprah Winfrey, Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, and Jeff from Amazon.
They've all been fired.
Yeah, that too. Close. Anybody else?
They're all pretty shrewd.
Mm-hmm. They've all failed. They've all had startups that have failed. Reid Hoffman had a social networking startup in 1999. He was early to the market, and it failed. Steve Jobs, when he left Apple, he had Next, which failed pretty miserably, was acquired by Apple and brought Steve back to Apple at that time. Larry Ellison almost bankrupt Oracle. And Jeff Bezos had a what he called the L Street marketplace that failed. So what we can learn from that is try and try again. Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. So you don't need to be afraid to try your idea, or the idea that you think you have may turn into a completely different idea. So where do ideas come from? Ideas come from new markets, from like the iPhone was a new market. There wasn't an iPhone that existed. It's a new technology. And it also comes from market disruptors. So an example of a market disruptor is Salesforce. Does everyone know who Salesforce is? So back in the late 90s, Salesforce didn't exist. Everything was enterprise software. And so Salesforce decided to come with a a monthly reoccurring revenue stream. And so what they were able to do that the software companies couldn't do is pivot. So they started to displace all of the software companies like SAP that no longer exist, and a company called Siebel that no longer exists, and even a company called PeopleSoft that was actually acquired by Oracle. And so now, fast forward to 2018, what is happening in that market is people are now trying to disrupt Salesforce. For every dollar spent on Salesforce, there's $4 spent on consulting services. They don't have the ability to pivot and to be agile anymore. So now they're in a place where people are starting to look at, how do I disrupt Salesforce, the big giant in the room? And as a small startup, you're agile and you have the ability to potentially do that. The other place where ideas come from is discoveries, whether that's a public discovery or a university discovery. I worked with a professor from Tufts who didn't realize this, but had created a new polymer, the first polymer in 30 years. This polymer is now being made into a solid-state battery that you can take a fork or a knife and stab right through it, and it still runs. So ideas coming out of universities, ideas coming out of material sciences. Material sciences typically take a really long time because you're introducing new materials into an environment, and that's really challenging. The other thing is university-based intellectual property. So I'm working with a flow battery company that had an idea to create really large battery storage. And they saw opportunities within different universities to use their intellectual property and piece them together so that they didn't have to start from scratch. So they're using IP from the University of Tennessee and other institutions to accelerate their development and get into the market. Problems. People form companies because they see a problem. Who has a problem that they want to solve that's either in their work life or in their personal life? What's your idea?
Oh. You're going to ask me what it is? It's generally a problem.
Yeah. There's therapy in down 136.
I have an appointment at 6.
Okay.
No, so can you rephrase the question, please?
Do you have an idea that's solving a problem that impacts your work or your life?
Yes, or immediate family.
Yep.
Sharon and I have a business together,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a wheelchair,
Mm-hmm.
a redesign of a wheelchair. We actually won the SVIC competition here on campus. So it's a redesign both for the person sitting in the chair and for the caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit more a lot more ergonomically effective, and we think we can hit price points that. Part of the problem is it's really hard to do apples to apples because there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing like this chair.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Her idea.
Yeah. Anybody else have an idea that solves a problem? I have somebody in one of my classes that is a cheerleader, and she has a lot of piercings. And so what she's created is a new way to clean piercings. And she has a working prototype. And so, people who don't have piercings are probably thinking, wow, that's really not a big market, but it's a really huge market. And it's something that she sees and she experiences, and it's like, how does she translate that to other people to make them understand, like an investor or somebody who's going to give her a loan or something to take that to the next level. So this is what I see a lot. Don't put the cart before the horse. And so what this means is a lot of people have ideas and they go right to execution. Like I don't know how many companies I see in the retail space where I'm driving up the road thinking, why is that company there? What are they going to sell and who they're going to sell to? And that's like on a very basic level. But a lot of people put the cart before the horse. They have an idea. They don't really vet the idea. They just kind of go to that next execution stage. I tried to make that like a techie looking horse too. It's just, I could have been more cartoony, but. And so really what you want to be able to do is vet your idea. And so I thought, since we have some people with ideas, that we could go through a couple of ideas and see if we could vet them out. So who wants to vet their idea? Okay. So what problem are you trying to solve? Are you Bob or Robert?
Either's okay.
Okay.
Safely shutting down an entire data center,
Shredding a data center.
powering down. Not shredding, it's shutting down.
The opposite of shredding.
Yeah, saving.
Okay. Oops, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. How large of a problem is this?
A few hundred machines.
For across how many? Is this like a university problem? Is this?
So every company that has a large data center.
Okay.
So if you have a room full of computers,
Mm.
how do you shut them all down safely?
Like in the old days? Do we now have rooms
Like next
again?
door.
Yep. Okay. Is this a pain point or is this a nice to have problem?
It's a pain point if they do destroy themselves on the way down.
Okay.
If
So
running power-
you're going to try to stop them from destroying themselves.
Yes.
How big is the potential customer base for that?
It's a good question. It's hard to say. It would have to be companies of a certain size. I don't know how many employees, but definitely university size. Like
So-
half the university size, any company that size.
Like 5,000 employees? So big companies. Does anybody else solve your problem?
Not that we could find.
Okay. No competition. So how are you going to solve it? We're all under NDA, so we're not going to steal your idea.
He already knows about it, so.
It's public knowledge.
Software that monitors the environment and shuts down, as I would if I were there.
So taking what's in your brain and putting it into software.
And it's faster than I am, by a lot.
Okay. How are you going to make money?
Hopefully sell it to somebody.
Licensing?
Sure.
Software as a service?
Probably not.
So-
Harder to do.
So it's software license. Okay. So we'll go through another one of these too, because I'd like to see if we have a business to consumer application in here. But so we've already identified this as a software product, right?
Yes.
What do you think you're going to sell your product for?
Say 10 grand
10 grand a month? 10 grand forever?
yearly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're selling your product to business, right? So you're a B2B. Oop. This clicker is really sensitive. Giving away all my tricks. Think I'll put it down. Okay, so how do you think you're going to market into this customer? What would be the best way to get to them? Social media?
Probably not. Demonstration, word of mouth, get it in other places that
Okay.
people don't know.
I just want to, can you flesh out the idea a little bit more? Just kind of, I'm a layperson in
Sure.
that world, and I don't know what you're talking about.
So this is called
Imagine-
socializing your idea.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have to, I mean, no.
Imagine a
something-
room this size, right, full of computer equipment. So you've got racks with 15, 20 systems per rack, refrigerator size, 30, 40 racks. To shut that stuff down, it heats up very quickly if the power goes out, or if you lose cooling, those battery backups. So you want to shut things down safely and save all your data and keep the machines from overheating and burning up. So the software would basically monitor the conditions of the room. If it gets too hot, start shutting things down, and shut things down in a few minutes if it loses power and you get that much battery.
So it's not just software, it also needs some physical components like temperature gauges and probes and things like that?
Yes.
So what happens now?
So if you didn't have them and the power, well, worst case would be that the cooling stops in the room goes to 160 degrees and all your stuff is destroyed. Maybe you've got $2 million, $3 million worth of equipment and all your data that's even more priceless.
And your customers' data.
And your services, everything's down for a significant amount of time. Does that answer?
Yeah, definitely. And you can do this. Can control all this stuff remote. You want to be able to control it remotely or have the
Unmanned. So a rule set that basically it interprets and says that 90 degrees shut off most of the systems, keep the critical ones. So it does what I would do if I was there, and I can check in on it remotely or coordinate efforts with people externally. So for somebody working from home, we can coordinate efforts to shut things down.
What do people think about the price point for that? Like if you're going to save this data center from melting down, just
love all.
it seems kind of low, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let's go with your per month.
Right. Preventing catastrophic meltdown. Yeah.
Especially if you have to provide all those physical components.
Most of the data centers of this level would have a lot of that componentry in them,
You just tap into it.
but it doesn't really take long. So, the hardware could be added in for very minimal costs.
The question I have is, like, from the consumer side, if I went to Best Buy right now, I could buy a, like, Nest thermostat thing that I could use to shut off things at a certain temperature. So, if I were to plug a surge protector into one of those, I would have something that would control a very small, scaled down version of what you're talking about, right?
It would turn off the power to it. So that's one, what you want to do is shut them all down correctly, properly, exactly. You don't want to just yank the plug, which is what you're thinking. So yes, and it's customized so you can put it, shut down individual things the way they want to be shut down.
So could you sell this to Nest? And like have them go enterprise in the enterprise direction? Or start that division?
A better example of it would be if you have a UPS on your computer and you tie those together with a cable. There's software you run on your computer that UPS provider provides, that when the power goes out and it gets down on battery, it'll shut your system down cleanly. That's the closest thing to it. It's just not done on a large scale like this.
I go back to the price point. So we're selling into companies that are likely very large, right? And we're going to be protecting all their critical data. So if we go to them and we say, hey, for $120,000 a year, you can use our software and it's going to save your world. I don't know. It's almost like the price needs to be it needs to match kind of where they think the risk is. Because to me, like, you're showing a really big problem and a really serious problem. And so I think it's bigger than you think it is.
Is that part of the issue here with the price point, maybe the fact that if there's no competition, there must be some kind of protocol that big companies have that doesn't cost them this. And so there's a general the air conditioning off.
They handle it differently by throwing a lot of service infrastructure, doubling up on everything. So redundant power, redundant cooling, redundant generators, massive battery, to try and mitigate the problem so that it's within tolerances. But that's very expensive.
Yep.
So if you look at your $10,000 a year compared to what I'm spending now to prevent catastrophe, is that half or a tenth or?
Depends on how big you are, right? So our $10,000 isn't changing by scale, and those other numbers do.
Yeah.
So at some point, you're small enough that your hardware
Yeah, wash.
would be easy. You'd say, why would I spend this much
Oh,
money?
that's enough, yeah.
Kind of seems like it ought to be more than 10 grand, but less than the price of a salary of an IT person.
You'd also need three.
Which is
right?
around
They have to be
120
24.
Okay,
They gotta
so
be
yeah,
24/7.
undercut that.
So this gives you something to think about, right? Is this something you're going to pursue?
We've been looking at it, but
He's saying yes.
Something that
yeah.
She says
university developed innovation.
Right. Right. So this is like, you got a lot of feedback from people that weren't even in that space. So what this talks about is like when you're looking at an idea, talking to as many people as you can to vet out that idea and see it from different angles will get to the best possible outcome. So, you want to take a picture of that? Are you good? You got it? Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a business to consumer idea? And we'll go through a little bit more quickly.
Yeah, it's it's kind of like a ride-sharing service, but for kids under 18,
yep.
because you can't go to an Uber if you're under 18
Mhm.
right now, and so it's more schedule-based system, mainly to pick kids up after school from their after-school programs, instead of having to wait for the late bus or something like that. The drivers are just more vetted than they are now, like for Uber, so they'll be drug tested. There's extra safety features to make the parents feel safe, like an SOS button on the app for the kid to press if there's a problem. The Uber drivers have their GPS on the thing up in front, so it would have a live dash cam feature with the front-facing camera and back-facing to kind of, and the parents can watch a live stream of that to make sure everything's all right.
I remember this idea.
Yeah.
What do the parents in the room think of this idea? Do we have any parents? What do you think of the idea?
Where's the parent? I guess like the child. So I think that's the competition, being the parent, right?
Yeah.
So
Any other parents?
I think it's a great idea. Yeah. It would seem to be that you're going to have the same problem the parent does, which is everybody's going to need it at exactly the same time for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
How do you have enough drivers that are going to be able to do it? Are they?
It's a schedule-based
Is it a
system.
bus almost, like there's going to be more than 2 kids per driver because you're going to be able to?
Yeah, parents can kind of collaborate to, do a pool together. Obviously, to make it cheaper and, the kids are together, it's a bit more safe. And it's a more schedule-based system, so it's not on demand like Uber is. You say like, okay, at 3 o'clock today, I want my kid picked up from the library and take him home because I'm at work or something like that.
What are you going to charge for it?
The rates would be similar to what Ubers are, or they would be calculated similarly, like by mile and time, but at a premium rate, cost more. And then as you pool together, like obviously do a bigger pool of kids in one car, it'll cost less per person.
Well, who's the competition?
Uber, obviously, and then parents that have the time to drive their kids, and then public transportation like school buses and everything like that.
Has Uber made ovations into this market? Because you said before that they can't take under 18 fares.
Yeah, no, they haven't, cause they can't take kids under 18, and Uber has also had some safety concerns that have been made public, so that's why people are concerned. So to be a lot more focused on safety. There is something similar to this in California. It's like a local thing. So yeah, I found that out through research. So it is possible to get like certain permits to be able to drive people underage. I think the parent would just have to sign off on it, like on behalf of them because they're an adult.
Did you do your project on this?
No.
Okay.
I did something else for that. But I did a project on it last year,
Mhm.
and I might be doing SBIC.
Mhm. So the point of the exercise is to really make sure if you have an idea that you vet your idea. Like hearing the voices of parents, we heard 2 different views from parents. I'm an aunt, so I am actually a competitor because I do a lot of pickup myself, on the fly, unscheduled. And so it's like talking to as many people as you can, making sure that you're solving a large problem, understanding the need between a pain point and a nice to have. I can imagine with your product that it's a lot on people's backs and pushing things, and that it is a pain point, and there's probably research that supports that. And then understanding how other people are solving the problem. Are you unique and different enough? That's really important, because I've had a number of students that are looking at projects that come back and say, it's already done. What am I doing? I didn't realize it was already done. So really kind of doing your research and making sure. And this stumps a lot of people, but how are you going to make money? And I see this a lot with software apps for your phone. You know, it's free for a period of time. You're going to get ad revenue. Well, those are kind of the one-offs that really do well. Like, there just takes a lot to make money at certain applications. So really vetting out your idea and doing this before you spend any money. So that's kind of the cart before the horse. Like, you really don't want to spend a ton of money vetting an idea only to find out that it already exists or there's competition in the space. So, and then you go to market analysis. What kind of company are you? We've heard from software, we've heard from a product company, I'm assuming, a service application, and how you sell your product and who you're selling to is really going to affect your sales strategy and your marketing strategy. So in a B2B sale, which is probably more your speed, $10,000 a month or more, that's going to look like a longer sales cycle. It's going to look like probably an ROI analysis, return on investment. It's also probably an educational marketing play of here's what can happen versus, it's Alex, right? I can't see that far. Mike. Wow, that's bad. Where if he's selling into this market, he might try social media channels. He might look at an indirect sales model, where I think you would probably be more of a direct sales model. So really figuring out, like, who's my customer, how do I sell to them, how much is my product going to cost, and then really start to think about how your sales and marketing plan is going to proceed from there. This is to establish product viability and also your willingness for time and energy. As you were saying, what might get in your way of doing it is going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of energy, and I may not be willing to do that. Once you're in that startup mode, you're in hustle, you're in go, whatever phase of development you're in. So, and I always say you should do this with low to almost zero cash, because you really don't want to waste money if you don't have a viable idea. Testing the market is key. Building it and thinking they will come is really, I've seen it a lot in a lot of different places. A good example of that, I was on the board of 3S Art Space in Portsmouth, and we felt like if we built that space, they were just going to come. Well, unfortunately, they didn't, right? So making sure you're testing your market is critical in this next phase. So you've decided, I have an idea, I've tested the market, I've vetted the idea, I feel really good about it. The next thing you're going to do is think about what will create value in your company. Does anybody have any idea about what's going to create value? And by that, I mean equity value, that your company is worth $5 million or $10 million. Does anybody have any ideas what could drive value? Patent? Anyone else?
Consistent revenue.
Consistent revenue?
Good brand image.
Mm-hmm. Any other ideas?
Customers.
Customers are good, yeah. The team is really important. Any other thoughts? What about mitigation of risk? So the more that you can prove that your product is sellable, that people want it, that you have customers and you have revenue and all those things, it drives the risk down that you're going to be successful. So test the market, refine the product. So build the product and test the market at the same time. Get feedback and keep doing that, because you want to make sure that you're developing the same product. It's not like I'm over here developing my product in a vacuum of my customer. You know your customer of you, right? So what if you went and talked to customers that weren't you and you found out, wow, that's a really cool idea, but if it only did this 3 other things, it would be even cooler. So don't get stuck on your idea and stay in it. Make sure you're talking to people and you're continually vetting it with customers who are going to buy your product. And this is really critical, and I've seen this happen a lot. People expand their revenue models before they've proven them. So they have some early wins. They're like, yes, we got this. We sold 500 units. We're just going to go, expand nationally. Believe it or not, I've actually seen companies expand their sales teams nationally and then realized that they were really early to the market. And what that means is people who were techno geeks really liked their product, but the rest of the market was lagging behind. So you got to really make sure you're not fooling yourself. And this is the time to do that. This is also the time to start thinking about building a strong foundation, and that means creating a vision, values, and a strategy, and and identifying your culture and critical key hires. Here, keep your costs low, but have an intentional story. So you may be a virtual company right now and you go to talk to a potential investor or even friends and family or whoever's going to invest in you, and they say, yeah, but you don't have any money for rent in here. And you say, that's intentional. We're a virtual company because we're saving our resources for development. So make sure as you build your story, it's an intentional story. It may take longer to develop, but it's an intentional story and it's one that's well thought out. It may say, I really need to accelerate because I'm going to miss the market if I don't. That's another intention. So I'm really going to need to spend a lot of money to ensure that I'm still competitive in the space. It's all personal to whatever your idea is. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the vision is where you want to see your business in the future. If you could solve world peace, that's where that would go. The values, I think, are really important. It's about who we are and how we show up as a company, and doing it in this phase ensures that when you add people, they're the right people. They believe in your vision. They support your values. Don't miss the strategic planning process. Being in venture, I've never read a strategic plan, ever. My colleagues have never read a strategic plan, but it's really critical to do the work of a strategic plan and know that will be the foundation if you go for venture capital for your pitch deck. But doing all the market research, doing all the things we talked about in the previous slides, having a solid plan is really a building block of foundation. And I keep using the word intentional. I'm a big proponent of looking out to the end of 2019 and envisioning what I want the outcomes to be, and then deciding what the goals are to get there, right? And you don't need to go out 5 or 10 years, because that's pretty crazy out there. I mean, I don't believe people that tell me they can see that far into the future, especially right now. But really be intentional about, if I do these 5 things in 2019 for my business, at the end of 2019, it will be this. It may be a working prototype. It may be a customer partnership. It may be a software beta. It may be early sales for you. It just depends on what your business is and how intentional goals are going to drive you to the next phase. Culture and team. I can't say enough about team. To me, human capital is just as important as the idea and the money. The cohesiveness of the team. Like if I'm a CFO or CEO and my strength isn't finance, I really need to have a strong finance partner next to me. I need to have a strong sales and marketing person. And that doesn't mean they're hires. They could be advisors that are around you that are telling you, this is what I would do, or advising you in a way that creates a cohesive team and it gives you strength that you don't have. I always hire people that are smarter than me. I just figure that makes me, I just try to take their obstacles out of the way. So really looking at who you hire and making sure they're both a cultural fit for you, and that you guys all want to show up and spend your time together, because it's going to be really hard work. Startups are hard work, but they're worth it. And then I also feel strongly that if you're going to choose to take an investment partner, whether that's a bank or a venture fund, it's really important that you realize that money is more than green, right? So you're going to spend, if you take venture capital, typically you're going to spend 4 to 5 years with that investor. So you need to make sure that you like each other. That's important, that they're going to add strategic value, whether that's bringing you partnerships, introducing you to other venture capitalists, or whatever they're going to bring, that they bring value besides their money, and that you like them. So now we've done it. We're here, right? We've proven out our revenue model. We've proven out that the market, bless you, wants our product, and we're into what we call the growth and expansion phase. So with that, this is typically where you would see an investment from a venture capitalist. You've taken a lot of the risk out because you have a proven model, you have customers, and now what you're really looking for is gasoline, right? You really want that money to accelerate your growth. So here it's all about creating predictable metrics, whatever those metrics are for you. I was with a company in Minnesota on Monday. They weren't they're a services business, but they have a healthy backlog. They weren't tracking it. So they're trying to find somebody to either invest or acquire them, and they weren't tracking the proper metrics for their business. So we started to identify what those metrics were. What's going to make an investor or somebody who may buy your company, who may not need an investor, think, wow, there's a lot of value here, and all your hard work is paid off with a nice, healthy valuation. So metrics, margins, when are you going to be cash flow positive? You may be cash flow positive and decide, I need to invest in sales and marketing to really accelerate my growth. But you also still need to think about what time frame. If I take $10 million in venture capital, is that going to turn around and I'm actually going to see that growth and we're going to be profitable? This is where you invest in scalability. And this is really the hardest part I see for companies, is they've gotten to this place of growth where they feel safe. Like, we're here, we've made it, and now they either need to stay there or they need to go across the bridge to the other side. And it's really hard to imagine yourself that big. All of a sudden you're selling 10,000, 20,000 of them. What does your organization look like? Who's going to support your product? You know, who's going to pick up the phone when the customer calls? Who's going to go sell those next 20,000 pieces of equipment? So there's a lot of different considerations here, and it's different for each company. And it's the hardest phase, is the growth and expansion.
So do you have any tips on, you have business to business, and this has to do with scale. Business to business, business to consumer.
Yep.
There's a lot in between there. Like for us, it's manufacturer to distributor to storefront to customer.
Right.
So any tips as to where it might fall in that spectrum?
I've seen a number of companies that they start by selling to the end customer, right? So that you get the market excited. A really good example of this is all these drug commercials, right? Who are they selling to? They're selling to the consumer, but who are they selling to? They're selling to the doctors. But they're creating the demand for you to go in and say, I have this problem, I saw it on TV, and you can fix me with a pill. So it's like, how do you educate your market, which would probably be like trade shows for disabilities and different things, where you're educating your end customer and creating that demand that then allows you to create a distribution channel to support it. So it's different for each one. I've seen business to consumer plays, or those Beats, right? Those headphones. And they got acquired by Apple because they created enough value in their company that, Apple scooped them up, and they probably have better distribution and pricing than Beats could have ever gotten. So there's like, who can acquire you is also a good thing to think about. I would think somebody in the recovery business could really scale your company if you started to disrupt how that market was being served. So it doesn't mean you have to build the company to 200 million or 300 million to be acquired. It just means you take it to where you want to go, but you're always thinking about, wow, if I wanted to go on and do my next startup, which I'm sure you have already, right?
Sure.
Because you're entrepreneurial, that you would think about what the potential exit might be. For you guys, it might be an equipment. I don't know enough about your product. I'm intrigued to hear about it when we're done. But it could be an equipment company. Who could take it to the next level and have a nice return on investment, and also, help the planet by helping people save their backs while they're helping their loved ones. So there's a lot of different ways this can go. The hardest part that I see with entrepreneurs is they struggle with the financials. So they have the idea, but they really don't know how to put that into a financial plan. I spent the last week helping my class do that, right? They all had ideas they needed to put into plans. And so they start to focus on the spreadsheet. They're like, oh, wow, we need to look at the spreadsheet and put the numbers in there. But it's premature because they haven't really defined the opportunity or how they're going to seize it. So now you're starting to think about, wow, how am I going to seize this? And it could be like, I need to invest in end user marketing, and I need to start building partner relationships through the distribution channel. And that's where I'm going to invest in parallel to developing my product. Now you can say, wow, what's that going to cost me, right? But it's not a stab in the dark. It's a well thought out and intentional strategy. So I believe if you build a story of your company, that the financials will tell your story. So turn your idea into reality. Be intentional, do your research, don't put the cart before the horse. Have outcomes and goals. Accelerate growth only when it's proven. And have a story of where you would invest if you were to get money. And the financial plan will tell your story. So my challenge to you is to innovate. Be a catalyst of new ideas, challenge status quo, right? I mean, we're in a university system. There's lots of status quo. There's things that impact students' lives. I've seen a number of students develop products just by things that are impacting their everyday life on campus. I've seen things like apps that tell you where all the parties are, you know? Like, it could be as simple as that. But look at your daily life and see where there's status quo. And if you have an idea in research, share it with the world. Share it with the world. Tell people your story. We just heard 3 people's stories, and we built on those ideas just by sitting in this room for 45 minutes. Imagine if you shared your story, where those ideas could go. And people are always willing to listen. I know I'm always willing to listen. And surround yourself with good advisors. Differing opinions are really important. And don't be afraid to fail. I will tell you, I've learned more from my failures than I ever have from my successes. So I'll open it up to questions. I don't know where we are on time. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Want to share their idea, explore anything a little bit more? Everybody looks so quiet.
Carol, can you talk a little bit about that idea of non-disclosure? You mentioned NDA earlier. And if you have ideas, often people are hesitant to talk about them too broadly. So how do you know when you can cross that line?
I think it depends on your audience. A venture capitalist will never sign a non-disclosure, in my experience. You know, if you're talking to somebody, Matt, I got it. If you're talking to Matt, that's what he does, and he shares ideas. I mean, you have to trust your instincts of who you're talking to. But if I was talking more broadly, like our whole class for the meaning of entrepreneurship and venture capital are signed up under NDAs because we have people come into the classroom. So NDAs are a good thing, but just balance that with who you're talking to and trusting that you're getting good advice. I've never signed an NDA, but I would never take somebody's idea and go replicate it either. So use your prudence, because some people will be completely turned off if you think, hey, do you want to meet for coffee and talk about your idea? Here's an NDA. You know, like it's a slippery slope. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that depending on what I come from a place of IP strategy, and so if you're thinking about, you know, intellectual property protection, patent, you have to be very careful about what you're discussing openly. And so if you want to have that open discussion with somebody, it's better to do it under an NDA if you're pre-filing for a patent. But otherwise, I think speaking about the grander idea without getting into the meat and potatoes of the idea is usually a good way to articulate what you're trying to do. And that's oftentimes a good way to hook somebody into wanting to learn more, and that's when you can broach the subject of, if you want to learn more, let's do an NDA really quickly so that we can get
The deep
into
dive, yeah. That's a good way to put it. Any other questions?
Do you usually find that you have a board of advisors that's different from somebody having an equity position necessarily, or are they putting time and skin in the game? Usually our advisors, people you know who are friends and are willing to help you.
It depends on where you are. Typically, a board of advisors wouldn't take an equity position, but I think it just depends on how structured you are. So I see a lot of companies out there that they have a good idea and they're in that vetting phase. They may not even have a corporate structure yet. So, I have some companies I advise that will probably do, for their first round of funding, convertible debt, meaning they're trying to get to a Series A equity financing, but they don't feel they have the value that they'll get too much dilution. So they don't really have stock yet. So, when you're in that early advisor phase, that's different from when you're in growth and expansion, and you may have a board of directors, and you may, want to bring on strategic advisors. Those are kind of two different things. Does that answer your question? There was a question in the back.
No, it's more of a statement. When you're talking about MBA, I have worked with folks that, because as a startup, you want to contract some folks. Definitely have ownership agreements with those folks and make sure you retain the ownership of whatever you're asking them to contract.
Yep.
And I had to do that, once we had a firm decided to spin things off into their own world with our stuff, and
Yeah.
it was good to have that happen.
Well, there is an inventions, there's inventions language, and it's like when you're, in the meat and potatoes of it, that's very different, to your point, than like, hey, I'm thinking of something that will, solve back pain, and you're not in the like IP of it, and those are like two very separate things. But definitely, if you're working with consultants or somebody who's helping you to develop your product, you definitely want not just an NDA, but an inventions agreement in place. Because what happened when all of our stuff went over to China is they started to reverse engineer it. So there are those smart people out there that do those things. So you want to lock up your IP as you develop it within your own company. And a lot of people do that with outsourced software development. So there's something called an invention agreement that locks that in as your intellectual property. Am I right? Really?
Yeah.
So in most software companies, if you join a software company, you say that whatever is created here.
An assignment.
No, not an assignment of an IP. We're not at an IP level,
Okay,
but
yeah.
like your work product belongs to the company. Even for me, I sometimes get those. Any other questions?
My question is kind of about the rigor of research, because you can, Google something, but it may not exist nationally in the terms that you would think to put it in. But something may exist like hyper locally, and it's really hard to make sure that you're like actually using the link for something new. It's hard to make sure that you're hitting what you need to with the language. Do you have any research tips or sort of ways to get a more rigorous research process going?
Well, there are research databases that you can search. I know. Are you a university student? I think through the library there are research tools that you can use. Just because somebody's doing it, though, doesn't mean you can't do it better, especially if it's a regional play. So, like, I wouldn't scour the universe for like nobody else is doing this idea anywhere, because it could be about the execution. How you're gonna, you may be different. It was when I was saying what's unique, right? And I work a lot with my consulting clients about how to put them into a unique position against their competition. Like if we were just a little bit broader in our market, we would be fend off that competitor. So there are going to be, when somebody tells me there's no competitors, I get a little weary. No, I do. I get a little weary because somebody's solving it somehow. Right? It may be internal resources that are spending a ton of money, but there you are going to have competition. Then it becomes like, how am I going to be better than my competition?
We did have only one thing. That is true.
That scares me even more.
Not for those reasons.
I get it. Any last questions?
Can you speak a little bit more about the forming the team? Because, barring the cliche answers like, oh, network more, or go to professional conferences. Like, how do I make friends with a lawyer? Like, I don't. And my circle is, a bunch of nerds. So like, getting outside of that, because my circle had, we might have like a dozen ideas, but then like forming that team is like, I don't know anyone in finance, and I probably don't want to. So but I should if I have an idea. So like, how do I bridge those?
How do you pair the nerds with the accountants and
And lawyers.
and lawyers? Yeah, no, really.
I think lawyers always want to get paid, and so do finance people. So how do I say, hey, I've got this idea, want to fly wing for free?
Do you have an
for a
idea?
while?
Well, because,
Are you a lawyer? I'm sorry.
I would be sorry too. I used to play on TV. I mean, there are these big networking events. I mean, I forget who it was. Well, it used to be a place at Pease that Mark Gavin used to have.
New Hampshire ICC, which is
Yeah,
now
the
Alpha
IC
Loft.
Yeah, ICC.
And
But
by the
Alpha
way,
Loft
right
is-
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alpha Loft is kind of shrunken their social events, but there are statewide, certainly, these big networking events, and they tend to be like annual or semi-annual parties. I guarantee you, corporate lawyers and accountants and all that kinds of other advisors will be there.
Well-
And that's basically where I met the lawyer that we're using now. And it's just, you go to enough of those things and you are gonna meet people because they're gonna hand you their card.
Well, and there's also
Overarching conversation.
there's also one of my students who comes here who actually had a resource that was a lawyer. So you should look here, right here in this innovation center for opportunities that may already exist that you don't know about. Because she incorporated her company and the attorney did it for free. So there are ways to get resources, and I'm an accountant. I'm not that bad, right? I mean, that's where I came from, but I love technology and I love geeks. I mean, I could sit and, you shouldn't underestimate that there's people that really like to think about what your idea is and how to make that, how to expand on that and make it really cool. I had a guy who thought he had an app, and then he realized I mentored him through the Alpha Loft program, the Accelerate program, that he actually created a new mobile database. So he went from an app company to a mobile database company just because we talked about it. Like, I didn't bring any wisdom to that conversation except asking probably really dumb questions, right? Asking questions of understanding. So there are places like here in Alpha Loft and other incubators. There's also a program coming up, Tech Out, the Alpha Loft Accelerator program. There's one of my mentees from the Alpha Loft program just won the Mass Challenge last week. So there's plenty of ecosystem resources that you can get that don't cost any money and people really love.
There's also two other resources that provide free services, and I think, and they have varying ranges for how long they create a relationship, but one is the SBDC, the New Hampshire Small Business Development Center, and they have offices throughout the state. The program's administered through UNH, and so there are counselors there that will work with you, and it can be on various elements of business ideas or to growing companies, and they can have these long-term relationships. And then another one is called SCORE, which is a compilation. Sometimes it's retired executives who have started and run companies, or sometimes it's people who are looking for the next opportunity, and they'll provide these mentoring and counseling services, and then also be networking at the same time. And those can also help expand networks while maybe looking at pointed questions you have along the way.
Yeah.
There's another resource that I wouldn't go through, these guys have been through, was the I-Core program. And I don't know what the requirements for getting into that are, but it goes to, you were asking about a very structured program. That I found to be very structured and has a lot of great ideas, and you just follow the path. And it pairs you up with a group to go through it, and they're dissimilar people. So the only venture capitalist I know was my partner in that group. But that's how I met him.
I think we're good. Any last questions? I'm standing in between food and beer, so I'll wrap it up. Happy to take any questions offline. Thanks for coming.